Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. I guess this is what we can call a quiet week. Now, that's not all that surprising. The release schedule is pretty dry right now, especially for mainstream acts. We got the Drake 3-pack coming next week, and there's nothing wrong with catching a bit of a breather here. But I will say it's a little bit surprising that of all the weeks where Billboard's kinda late to uploading the charts, I'm a bit surprised it wound up being this one. Well, okay, I'm not about to waste that much time here, so our top 10 and Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo is still at number 1. Basically, with a lot of the sales and streaming traction now translating more to the top spot on radio. But man alive, those margins have shrunk considerably. This could fall away at any time, and I do consider it vulnerable if Drake is targeting a number 1 debut. It's kind of the optimum time for him. Now, that would mean going past Up by Cardi B at number 2, which is running up the streaming with good sales and has considerable radio traction, but again, it's all a margins game, and I still think this has not yet seen its peak. But then we got Blinding Lights by The Weeknd back up to number 3, and look, I still love this song, but the fact that it spent a solid year in the top 10 kind of blows my mind, mostly because of how slow its exit has really been. Now compare this to 34 Plus 35 by Ariana Grande featuring Doja Cat and Megan Thee Stallion holding at number 4, but given how it's lost traction on streaming, it's holding its position rather than having actual groundswell, and the stronger evidence of that comes with Go Crazy by Chris Brown and Young Thug down at number 5, as it looks like the radio is trying to finally rotate this damn song out, and rather aggressively at that. Now this might open up room for Save Your Tears by The Weeknd, currently at number 6, except it looks like the radio hit a peak this week and the streaming has stagnated there, which is just an earlier stage of what happened for Mood by 24 Gay Golden featuring Ian Dior at number 7, where the streaming and radio are just contracting outright. It's on its way out. Then we got Callin' My Phone by Lil TJ and Black at number 8. And yeah, the streaming is still really strong, but it's got no radio traction or any significant sales. So again, it's more the weaknesses below it than any strength of its own, which is probably why What You Know About Love by Pop Smoke crept back into the top 10 at number 9 despite wavering on the radio all week. And even then, I could probably also blame some of that on Levitating by Dua Lipa holding the spot at number 10 despite all of its radio losses. Again, it's going out too. But look, my point is that the chart is really in the right state to be broken wide open. So even if we don't have much in the way of losers or dropouts, this could very easily be coming. Now in the latter category, the only real stories that we got are the underperformance of Afterglow by Ed Sheeran and Monster by Shawn Mendes and Justin Bieber, the latter of which still kind of fascinates me given how much I was convinced that Shawn Mendes had career traction before this album. It's really a kind of a career killer of a mess. Unfortunately, our losers are nowhere near as interesting, mostly just kind of predictable, as Lonely by Justin Bieber and Benny Blanco skids to 41, and Body by Megan Thee Stallion at 56 heads toward the expected exit. Then you had Wasted on You and Somebody's Problem by Morgan Wallen hitting 62 and 93 on their way out, and Drankin' and Smokin' by Future and Lil Uzi Vert lost any fleeting momentum to 94. Finally, to round things out, there's Hole in the Bottle by Kelsey Ballerini at 89. As I predicted last week, it's getting rotated out for the season, and honestly had a pretty decent run while we're at it. I'm actually kind of satisfied with how it did. But where our losers were rather predictable, I'm not really about making heads or tails about our returns and gains here, with the only one in the former category being Bishota by Karol G at number 100, coming back yet again, likely thanks to its persistent international presence. But we saw a lot of gains off the debuts last week, and well, I'm not going to complain about The Business by Tiesto at 81, or Telepathia by Kelly Uchis at 39. I'm a little bit more reticent about Trackstar by Mooski at 66, or Hello by the late Pop Smoke and A Boogie with the Hoodie finding traction at 85. And it's not a good sign when the best of our other gains is My Head in My Heart by Ava Max at 45, because otherwise we got One Too Many by Keith Urban and Pink somehow sticking around to 75, or Astronaut in the Ocean by Masked Wolf continuing up to 49, or in the most inexplicable case, Beatbox by Spot 'em Got 'em spiking up to 15 because it suddenly got a major push on streaming and sales, likely thanks to that Lil Durk generic remix, because you know what, he just does that. But from there, we get a pretty small-sized list of new arrivals. A lot of country adjacent cuts here, funnily enough. Starting off with number 99, Gone by Dierks, Bentley.
I've been sitting on the couch watching TV all day long, all day long. I've been trying to figure out how a good thing went wrong.
I mean, there's a part of me that looks at this song and thinks, would it have really been so hard to push Hot Country Nice to the radio, try and drive a little bit of traction that way? But I also get the impression that Dierks Bentley has an unspoken agreement with his label that they'll let him goof off and then make the best material of his career, so long as he inevitably swings back around and makes something that's more commercially accessible, even if it's nowhere near as good. So of course all that rich, organic, neo-traditional warmth is swapped out for a clunkier mix with a lot of thin acoustics and a weirdly jerky hook that seems like it places Dierks Bentley's vocals a little bit too far back, and I'm left wondering what the tone of any of this is supposed to be. It's taking the implied breakup, go off the beaten path approach with a bit of a lighter hand, but it's also hard to ignore just how much this song resembles Alan Jackson's Gone Crazy, especially with the central line on the chorus, and let's be real, this is far from that level of quality. I mean, I don't dislike this, but I also don't really care about it, and for a new Dierks Bentley single, I'm gonna say it, that's a problem. Number 96, Nobody by Dylan Scott.
Gonna love you like I do. Yeah, nobody gonna love you like I do.
Okay, the last time I talked about Dylan Scott was around 2017-2018, who had 2 singles with a completely forgettable chart run, half because his music was completely unremarkable and trend-chasing, half because he was on Curb Records and likely found all of his momentum stalling out given that label's pedigree of ruining careers. But thanks to the success of Lee Brice, it seems like Curb is starting to turn things around, and that unfortunately means giving other chances to names on the roster, with a song that Dylan Scott first dropped 2 years ago, and okay, hey, if you want something that wants to chase a half step behind Kane Brown and sounds like utterly generic boyfriend country, complete with the fake hand claps and more focus on percussion that actively brings in trap elements than much in the way of melody, I guess Dylan Scott delivers. The frustrating thing is that this guy does have a rather unique, thicker lower register that kind of seems like it would fit alongside someone like Brett Eldridge, but the production and the writing just gives him nothing to work with. It's so generic. So yeah, it just kind of winds up being forgettable as always. But you want to hear someone who has all of this, but somehow winds up considerably worse? Number 92, Breaking Up Was Easy in the 90s by Sam Hunt.
Somewhere I can be alone, try to let you go. Something always reminds me I've been breaking up was easy in the 90s.
I think what annoys me the most with this song is how it's got such an obvious layup and it squanders it in the shallowest ways possible. I mean, par for the course for Sam Hunt, but you could structure a song like this off the great country breakup songs from the 90s. Add a little bit more framing to your nostalgia like Old Dominion always does. But for as much as that's the most recognizable line of the song, it doesn't really match the sentiment of Sam Hunt stalking this girl on social media, hypothesizing on everything she might be doing and why she's not behind him, and then calling himself just a product of the modern generation. But here's the thing, brooding assholes were not exclusive to the 2020s, and with that, the entire song just feels really goddamn petulant. And you know what, even that could work if anything in the composition or delivery could sell it. The pedal steel and the major chord progressions make the song feel a fair bit brighter than it needs to be, but it also tries to slow down and wash itself out and be kind of serious for the half-spoken word verses that match with nothing over the overpolished and underweight drum machine knock. There's just no atmosphere to this. It feels so flat and phoned in, pardon the pun, and considering how miserable some Sam Hunt songs can be when he really tries, that says something when he bungles it. Now, all that being said, it's not the worst song from Southside, and if he's not gonna push 2016, this is probably his best pick for a single. I mean, it's not remotely good, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse. That's all I'm saying. Number 90, Drunk and I Don't Wanna Go Home by Elle King and Miranda Lambert. I I was kind of surprised when I first saw this collaboration. I knew Elle King had connections in country since she worked with Dierks Bentley on Different for Girls, and you know what, from what I've heard of her stuff, Miranda Lambert might be a pretty obvious collaborator, but it's not going to guarantee it would work. Initially, I was kind of reminded of when Miranda Lambert and Carrie Underwood teamed up for their very underwhelming Bad Girl team-up in 2014 with the heavier percussion focus and some of the questionable production, but this song feels a lot more fully formed than the questionable draft that really was something bad. Elle King and Miranda Lambert have a lot better chemistry for one, and they can lean into the rougher rollick of the song a fair bit more effectively, even if a lot of the skittering banjos and the acoustics and what might well sound like millennial whoops think that this could have maybe worked 5 to 10 years ago, and it kind of makes me wonder in the composition if this had a longer development time than we all realized. But you know what, I also like that the song kind of leans into more groove and some genuine momentum, and there's enough dumb recklessness in their drunken antics that feels kind of anthemic, but also real and detailed in a way that lends the song some real stakes. I mean, it's kind of a shame that none of us can really go out to make this a barroom staple, but it is timed for its ascent when we might actually be able to go out, and I'd just be fine with that. This is a really damn good song. Hope it does well. Number 74, Only Wanna Be With You by Post Malone. I remember when the timeline just lost their shit when they heard that this cover existed, but in concept this doesn't really surprise me at all. I've often had the feel that Post Malone would be just fine making laid-back, guitar-driven, comfortable bar music if he could see success from it in the same way that Hootie the Blowfish did in the 90s, and both acts have, let's call them, distinctive voices, so could the cover work? Well, putting aside the fact that Post Malone did this as a brand integration with Pokemon, and he swapped out the Miami Dolphins reference for the Dallas Cowboys. Oh, look, I like Dak Prescott getting his money, but it's an overpayment for a good, especially not great quarterback, and really that deal should have been worked out 2 years ago. Alright, the cover, it's okay. At best. Let's be real, Post Malone's warble does not have the warmth or presence that Darius Rucker's voice does, and you can also tell that Watt was getting a little bit too fast and loose with the cleaner production and the more synth integration, which doesn't really match with the down-home, rough-edge, barroom vibe of the song. Now granted, I don't really love the original that much either. It's not a Hootie track I seek out that much, there's others I like more. It's fine without being all that great or memorable, and I'm not sure Post Malone elevates it, or does enough with the cover that I really care all that much. I don't know, it feels like a gimmick that won't last on the charts more than anything. It just doesn't give me much to work with. It's fine, but I won't care about it. And finally, number 64, AP by Pop Smoke.
Might be too tall, icy, AP, spicy. I wasn't checking my Nike, and my killer might be too tall, icy.
You know, there was a part of me set to go off about how people have really started milking Pop Smoke's posthumous verses, but this does feel a little bit different to me, tied into a movie that Pop Smoke actually played a role in. The movie's called Boogie, where he also contributed to the soundtrack. Now granted, given my mixed reaction to a lot of Pop Smoke songs, I didn't really have high expectations for this, and that might have been the right decision, because while this feels like less of a mainstream concession than a lot of Pop Smoke's posthumous project from last year, it's a brand of trap and New York drill that just does not give me that much to work with. I've heard a lot of it before. Yeah, the shuddering bass and the buzzed out percussion is a sound he can work with, and his voice has always been kind of impressive in that lane, but the content is just nothing all that distinctive, and shooting people, flexing, and getting blown. I mean, it's not bad per se, it doesn't have some of the questionable lines on Dior that I never liked, but it also makes me wonder how much more of this approach for Pop Smoke will have staying power if the labels recycle it, especially if they push for more posthumous projects. I mean, it's not bad again, but not all that memorable, if I'm being real. But that ends a pretty short week, and one where the best and worst fall out pretty fast. Best of the week goes to Drunk and I Don't Want to Go Home by Miranda Lambert and Elle King, and the worst is Breaking Up Was Easy in the 90s by Sam Hunt. Again, might be a better cut on Southside, but that doesn't make it tolerable. Next week we got Drake, and maybe even that Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak collaboration that really has sounded pretty promising. I mean, stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.